A transport to the other side of the world. A cargo worth millions, about 10,000 cars, and gigantic machines.
What the worst thing is going to happen, somebody gets hurt, somebody gets in between.
With every vehicle, the risk increases. Less space, less time to react.
Most of the time, the problem is the height.
No other ship of its kind can carry so many cars and heavy stuff. On a journey through the narrowest waterways on Earth.
You're nervous. Really, you're nervous. But you always have to keep calm.
A real mega transport. The port at Antwerp in Belgium, one of Europe's most important transfer sites for new vehicles, and the starting point for the mega transport of a Norwegian giant. The Trapper, world's largest automobile transporter, a ship that takes global vehicle logistics to a whole new level. 200 meters long, 36 meters wide. But the major attraction is actually behind the steel hull. A gigantic cargo area, in total over 71,000 square meters. Enough room for 8,500 cars. An extraordinary number, but still not the biggest challenge for all those involved. They are embarking on a journey covering 28,000 kilometers, from Antwerp navigating around Germany, England, France, and Spain, and then out onto the expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. From there, across the pond to ports in the US and Jamaica, through the Panama Canal onto the Pacific, and all the way to New Zealand and Australia, all that in just 50 days. The planning for this mammoth task is all his responsibility. Port Captain Per Henningsen. For this usually unflappable Norwegian, it's a permanent race against the clock. Here in Antwerp, he needs to board 1,000 cars. But the head planner has just 16 hours for a secure loading process.
All the time you have a challenge to try to get, because you have, on a regular vessel, you will have 3, 4, 5 hatches, which you can eventually plan in. Here, everything has to come through the same door.
But before anything is put on the ship, the massive cargo has to be cleared from the parking lot. A job for 20 on-site port workers known as stevedores. They're the ones that will pick up each and every one of the 1,000 cars. First, there's a check-in using a scanning system. Each scanned automobile is registered and then ready for the mega transport. Only then will it be allowed on board to become one more car on what is the largest floating parking lot in the world. Each vehicle is assigned a specific parking spot, but to do that is anything but simple. The Trapper has 14 cargo decks, which are configured into loading zones by the port captain. Each zone represents a port, at which the ship will load and unload vehicles. The concept is, the farther the destination port, the farther back the loading zone. Sounds logical enough. However, there is one small problem. Per has to maximize the use of the area, while at the same time making sure the loading zones are freely accessible. Otherwise, with last-minute changes of plan, there's a risk of the worst-case scenario, which would involve reparking hundreds of cars in a confined space against the clock. They refer to it as shifting. It's extremely time-consuming, and time is the last thing Per has to spare. Only 16 hours for 1,000 cars. With less than 1 minute allowed per car, completing his task without making any mistake is virtually impossible.
Myself, I have loaded hundreds of vessels, but I think I can only count of 2 hands the ones which have been 100% full without any shifting.
The most common problems? Last-minute new orders that suddenly increase the number of vehicles, or mistakes in the initial numbers. The result is that there is not enough room in the loading zones. The person responsible for making sure the cars get to their assigned spots is foreman Dimitri Gomerin. He checks the cars in for Port Kembla in Australia and Auckland in New Zealand. What's extremely important here is non-stop contact with his head planner.
Yep.
That is very good. Finish as indicated here. Leave this open.
Yes, the Auckland. Leave the Auckland.
Yeah. Forget about that, then you are finished.
Yeah. And then the Auckland over here. Yes, and make the complete flow stop.
Yes.
Most of the cars are brand new from the factory. Dimitri's job? A permanent balancing act between speed and precision.
Just a little bit more. Enough.
The time pressure is immense, but the space in the zones is limited. Despite this, potential dents are not Dimitri's biggest worry.
What the worst thing is can happen, somebody gets hurt, somebody gets in between, the lashing crew is over here and we don't check each other out.
Throughout the parking process, the lashing crew secures every car with special straps. They attach the straps to lashing hooks or car rims at the front and back of the car and to holes in the deck. This is designed to keep the valuable freight from rocking during the ocean passage, and in the worst case, coming loose to create a floating motorway pileup. More than half the allotted time has now passed, and the first two decks are filling up. But a bit too much, according to the plan from Port Captain Per.
Okay. We loaded for Port Kembla 112 already.
That's today or including what they did yesterday?
I don't know, did they load yesterday as well, the Port Kembla?
Yeah.
The problem, a last-minute order for a delivery to Port Kembla, Australia. But the loading zone for that is already full. And the cargo for Auckland, New Zealand is ready to be parked. Port Captain Per has to improvise while keeping one eye on the clock.
Maybe you can just leave it open for the time being. You finish Port Kembla.
Yes, like always, yes.
And then you go down.
And then I fill up with the Auckland, or
fill up that with Auckland.
yes.
And then eventually when you need, you go upstairs. And
Oh, for the balance.
Yes.
You want the balance over here?
Yes.
Okay, no problem.
The Trapper has an enormous total load capacity of 21,000 tons. Per has to keep the weight of the cargo evenly distributed at all times, so that the ship does not tip. It's a mega challenge, especially when it comes to last-minute changes. Per redistributes the cars on the spot. The new ones for Port Kembla are going to fill up the zone for Auckland. He spreads the spaces that were lost across 3 other decks. High-pressure work for foreman Dimitri and his team of stevedores. 150 cars suddenly need a new parking place. Time to go before the planned departure? Just 3 hours. But things look good.
Okay.
1,000 cars are in their proper positions, even 1 hour ahead of schedule. Station 1 of the mega transport finished, but there's still 2 months and a whole lot of work to do until they reach their final destination. Until now, only the uppermost 2 decks of the gigantic transporter have been loaded. Some decks remain sparsely occupied, while others are completely empty and waiting for their cargoes at upcoming ports. Next stop, Bremerhaven. Port Captain Per is already starting to prepare for the loading process there, because in Bremerhaven, he expects more than simple cars.
This cargo is shifted from deck number 8 to be able to load trucks.
The largest vehicle transporter in the world doesn't just carry automobiles. It also hauls all sorts of high and heavy cargo. This is only possible due to the trapper's special flexible decks, whose height can be adjusted in order to accommodate some pretty monstrous machinery. The next morning, the crew prepares for departure on the bridge. Just one last technical step remains, raising the huge ramp.
Is everybody ready? Let's go.
Starting time for the Mega Transport's trip around the globe. The trapper has to make it to Australia and New Zealand in just 49 days. Along for the ride, thousands of cars. But the biggest cargo of them all has yet to be loaded. The ship travels through the inland waters of Belgium in the direction of the North Sea. Then, 500 kilometers along the coast of Holland and Germany to Bremerhaven. Day 3 of the Mega Transport and halftime for the first crossing. For the crew, everything is running calmly and comfortably. But one man has been racking his brain for hours. Head planner Per has to distribute every car and every high and heavy unit properly across the cargo space.
What is the main thing with this is to keep everything open so that you are not stuck.
The problem? He still doesn't know exactly what to expect, and one order in particular has him worrying more than usual.
We are eventually going to load some interesting things, which is said to be a trailer, said to be 7.5 meter wide, too high to pass, so they have to go on high space. I'm actually anxious to what it is.
Per doesn't have any information about the height of this mysterious object, but he will plan, prepare, persist, and succeed like he always does. Day 4, arrival in Bremerhaven, the biggest parking lot in the world. Over an area of 240 hectares, there's room for 95,000 cars. Bremerhaven is considered the most important trade hub for automobiles in Europe. The port handles 2.2 million vehicles every year. 2,000 of those are now going on a journey around the world. For our Mega Transport, that's child's play, because the other things waiting here include tractors, giant construction machines, and trucks. In short, this cargo is hard to work, high and heavy, a triple whammy for Per. And yet, there's again just 16 hours to complete the job. The fact that any oversized colossus can even think about taking a ride on the trapper is based on two factors. First, the 12-meter wide and 6.5-meter high loading hatch. Second, the ramp. Load-bearing capacity 375 tons, the weight of 75 full-grown elephants. The additionally heightened high and heavy area is just behind the gate. Even the largest machinery can pass through unscathed. What's more, 5 of the 14 decks are movable and can be adjusted in height. Not to mention their respective ramps. The result? a total of 18,195 square meters of space for high and heavy cargo. And that's exactly what's happening on Deck 8. Whenever there are technical adjustments to be made to the cargo area, everything responds to his command. Chief Officer Wang Chongwen. His job, to make sure that several large trucks can fit in here.
Because
The height of this deck right now is 2.3 meters. That's not enough. We need 4.2 meters to load the high and heavy cargo here.
In just a few minutes, the cargo height practically doubles, and all that without any complicated technology. Wang and his crew push up each of the deck panels using a simple hoist.
Is everything all right up there?
Everything's okay.
Last step. The panel has to engage into the safety supports. Time needed to work on each panel? Less than 5 minutes. After just 1 hour, the entire deck is almost twice as high as it was before.
This is a very great function for us. It allows us to transport way more cargo according to different cargo types.
In this case, to accommodate commercial trucks. The concept is that, as in Antwerp, stevedores drive each of the 100 trucks to its planned space. Fasten down and done. After about 8 hours, the last square meter of the deck is full. At the same time, the other decks from above are filling up with cars. Extra high decks 5 and 3 are still basically empty, but all that's about to change. Time for the really massive freight, like this 21-ton screening machine. Mobile high and heavy units have to go to Deck 3, one ramp below. It's a process that can cause serious problems when dealing with such a colossus. It's down. For the workers, it's a catastrophe. There isn't just the fear that the valuable cargo could be damaged. The huge agricultural machine is now blocking the only access to the deck. This will test Per and his team to their limits. Keeping to the tight schedule? Seriously endangered at this point. For Marshaller Brian Förster and his co-workers, every second counts.
The back end is sitting a little bit too low. This makes it hard for us to push it over. Of course we try our best, but if it won't work, it might need to be shifted on an upper deck.
But it's already full on top. Brian could move the other high and heavy units to make room for the giant, but that's going to take too much time. The alternative plan? Use rubber mats to remove the machine from the ramp without damaging it. But the first attempt ends in failure. The center of gravity at the rear end is too low. Brian needs to think fast, because the next giant is already waiting. Meanwhile, main deck 5 is slowly filling up, but there's a problem brewing here as well. Our head planter Per is still calmly waiting for his mysterious cargo. Supposedly a 7.5 meter wide unit on a long trailer. But that's all he knows about it. And that's not the only thing testing his nerve.
Most of the time the problem is the height. That actually the measurement is not correct.
The result of having the wrong dimensions? Seriously sobering. The high and heavy area is completely full up, and the adjustable panels of the cargo deck above already raised to the absolute maximum. Per has just 2 hours left until the trapper's planned departure from Bremerhaven. But right now, all he can do is wait. A long, unnerving wait. But then...
It is big.
Talk about big. The cargo, the bucket of an enormous dump truck. Per's initial irritation has now developed into real worry. Will this monster even fit on the ship? Meanwhile, on Deck 3. The huge screener is still blocking the only way down. Marshal O'Brien and his team have to get the 20-ton Colossus off the ramp as quickly as possible. They use wooden slats to prop up the machine. This should keep the low rear end from scraping across the floor.
So, I hope it works now. Looks good.
Sure enough, the machine slowly starts to move. Perhaps not the most elegant solution, but effective. The high and heavy unit arrives in the cargo area undamaged, to the great relief of Marshal O'Brien.
Well, we're satisfied that it worked, right?
Now the path is clear. For the really big cargo. Despite the continuing occurrence of minor adversities, hundreds of tons of the high and heavy cargo loads make their way to the deck on schedule. Construction machines, cranes, excavators, the big, bad, and heavy are all in attendance. A good hour before quitting time, there are 199 of the big boys on board. Just one is still missing. The oversized dump truck bucket throws everyone into a major concern. It's totally unclear as to whether the unit will even fit on the deck at all, especially given its height. Raising the cargo area is highly problematic because, at the moment, the decks above it are all full.
The worst case scenario, you would have to discharge maybe 200-300 cars to be able to lift the panel.
It would be a monumental effort, which is no longer achievable. At least not in the time they have left, which is about an hour before the mega transport's scheduled departure. Mission accomplished. The height is not a problem. Even the length and width fit exactly into position. Head planner Per breathes a sigh of relief.
Finally. This is good. This is what you've been waiting for the whole day, So it's really nice. You know that it will fit. And I have loaded so many of these things, but still it is the heart is running.
And that, even after 30 years of experience on the job. In just one day, Per and his stevedores have loaded 2,000 new vehicles, plus 200 high and heavy units. But the longest and heaviest part of the mega transport is yet to come. Loading and unloading continues at the next stops in Europe: England, France, and Spain. The ship then travels all the way across the Atlantic and to the east coast of the United States, via Jamaica, and to the Caribbean Sea. A real tight spot awaits the mega transport there: the Panama Canal. Day 28 of the Autoliner's journey from Europe to New Zealand. The trappers expected to reach Panama by morning. The full responsibility for the mega transport lies with Captain Suv Chung. More than anything, he has to keep one thing in mind: the weather.
Show me the weather forecast. What's our situation? It looks like, oh no, there's a lot of yellow and red.
Reports are calling for heavy storms directly at the Panama coast. It's a serious danger for the mega transport.
If we encounter bad weather, the ship will start rolling and pitching too much. This means first that we cannot speed up and lose time, but also second, we are afraid of our cargo that could start moving.
And, in the worst case, major damage. Avoiding it is all in the hands of First Officer He Tzu-yong. No pressure.
Make sure that every car is lashed down properly. Otherwise, fasten them. But be careful. Those are new cars. No scratches, all right?
The cargo below is worth several hundred million euros, which is why checking that it is secure has top priority, especially since storms have been forecast. Checking the cargo regularly has another reason. During the course of the journey, vibrations in the ship cause the lashings to loosen.
Sometimes the lashings aren't fastened down properly. Sometimes the angle isn't right, and some cars are even missing a lashing.
Lashings need to be anchored at a 45-degree angle. If they're too loose, the cars could shift. And because they're parked so close together, they would then crash into each other. For this job, one thing is more important than anything else for He and his crew: a very keen eye.
Cadet, do that again. This is still not the right angle. Fasten it properly.
Perfect lashing tension is an absolute necessity. If any damage occurs to the cargo, it's the trapper crew that will bear the responsibility. Even in normal conditions, the crew has to check and, if required, tighten the lashings every 3 days. No exceptions accepted.
We need to check every single car.
To prepare for the looming storm, the guys add chocks to make sure the cars don't move. It's an extra security measure that for 8,500 cars takes several hours to complete. And yet, it's absolutely necessary for getting the cargo safely to its destination undamaged. Finally, the First Officer He makes a last check. Time to call it a day. As the ship continues to approach the storm, there's nothing left for the crew to do but wait. They're a tight group, and no wonder. Many of them spend up to 4 months at a time together on the high seas.
Where's my card?
I don't have it.
Oh, crap.
Most of the crew members see each other more than they see their own families. It's a tough break and a major challenge. Each of them plays their part in making sure a mega transport of this magnitude is pulled off trouble-free. But trouble-free isn't how you describe the bridge at the moment. The storm brewing is a major source of worry for Captain Su. The trapper must pass through the Panama Canal tomorrow. Otherwise, it could take days until they receive a new transit approval. A storm on the open seas would be a problem, but in the unforgiving confines of the canal locks, it could be a catastrophe.
If the wind blows from starboard, from port side, or any other way, the vessel could deviate from the course. But in the lock, there is no room for deviating, which means the vessel could collide with the lock's wall.
The transit slots for the Panama Canal are scheduled precisely. Any deviation would cause a major backup and is therefore not tolerated.
You're nervous. Really, you're nervous. But you always have to keep calm.
The trapper's scheduled transit, 4 in the morning, in complete darkness. But even in the best conditions, the trip will be a challenge. The Panama Canal joins the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. First, there's a 3-level lock system that lifts the ship 27 meters to the man-made Gatun Lake. From there, it's 82 kilometers through the narrow canal. Another lock awaits them at the end, which will take the trapper onto the expanse of the Pacific Ocean. For a mega transport like ours, such an excursion was impossible until very recently. The canal is over 100 years old and was designed for the largest ships at that time. Maximum width, 32.3 meters. For behemoths like the Trapper, that's not enough. Canal authorities began construction on newer, larger lock systems in 2007. Since its opening in 2016, ships belonging to the so-called Neo-Panamax class can now transit the canal, and that includes the Trapper. But even though the new lock chambers are 55 meters wide, for the Trapper, this means not even 10 meters clearance on either side. And in the dark, no less. On day 29 of the mega transport, the Trapper is at the Atlantic side entrance to the canal on time, at 4 o'clock in the morning, Agua Clara. To manage the lock chambers, the crew now has local support. Harbor pilot Robert L. Schnack and his team are specialized in guiding oversized transport vessels safely through the locks. And it works like this. The man-made Panama Canal is 27 meters above sea level. To get the mega transport up this high, it uses 3 lock chambers, like steps. When the ship gets to the first chamber, the chamber is pumped full of water to raise the Trapper up by 9 meters. The process is repeated for a second and third time, each raising the ship by 9 meters. The difficulty? The captain and pilot need to position the ship perfectly in the middle of the lock chamber. Because during the pumping process, the engine must be stopped, which means there's no chance to make corrections. Here we go. Chamber 1 of 3. The challenge is maneuvering the vessel straight through. In order to steer the course on the high seas, the Trapper uses an automatic steering system. But while going through the locks, the ship has to be maneuvered manually, as required by law. For the entire duration of the canal transit, the pilot gives the orders to the captain. But Captain Su still has the last word.
Starboard 10, please.
Starboard 10.
Got starboard 20.
Starboard 20.
Each command decides whether the ship will keep its course or crash into the wall.
We have to hold the ship steady like this without any deviation.
Not deviation too much.
Stop engine.
Stop engine.
At least we are lucky there is no wind.
The predicted bad weather has not arrived. After 30 minutes, the trapper is in the first lock chamber, but there is still a palpable tension on the bridge.
Mr. Pilot, if we can pick up the slack on the stair, not yet now.
Let's wait until the starboard side is ready and then
And we'll synchronize to heave in. Thank you.
Now, the engine is stopped, and Captain Su's hands are tied. Dock workers secure the ship with ropes so that it doesn't move during the pumping process. And then, off we go. Within 8 minutes, the trapper is raised 9 meters. Now the path is clear to chamber number 2. Until now, everything seems to have run smoothly. But just before the next stop, the ship comes dangerously close to the lock wall. Now every command has to be perfect. No mistakes, no excuses.
Half to starboard. No. Starboard 20.
Fortunately, that slip of the tongue, quickly corrected, went unpunished. Not all do. The chamber fills with water from the Gatun Lake, raising the trapper to 18 meters. "30 to 40 ships pass through the locks every day. This requires the services of almost 300 pilots. They get additional support from 36 tugboats, which help the ships to keep the tight course. It's a major effort, and therefore a major expense. The cost of a single passage for a mega transport like ours? Up to 400,000 euros. Now, just the third and last lock chamber to go. Once again, for the captain and pilot, this takes razor-sharp concentration.
Stop engines.
Stop engine.
Bow full to port.
Bow full to port.
While the lock system pumps the trapper up one last time, the pilot and captain have the time to focus on one final and most important task: guiding the 200-meter-long mega transport out of the narrow lock system and into the canal unscathed. The trapper is now 27 meters above sea level, the level of the Panama Canal. To safely reach it, Captain Su needs to bring the trapper out of the lock in as straight a line as possible. To do this, he uses the yellow line as a guide. So that the rear does not swing out, the ship must always move parallel to the line. On command from captain and pilot, the tugboats pull the monster through. But halfway out, what happens is this.
Do you see the ship is now very close to this critical point? Now we have to bow half starboard.
420.
Port 20.
Less than 2 meters separate the trapper from the solid stone wall.
You see?
No, easy to
indicate.
Easy to indicate.
Chips.
Meche. Okay, Meche.
Third officer, is the back out of the lock?
It has just gone out.
Starboard 10.
I repeat, it has just gone out.
Great. So we are safe at the back corner? Are we safe?
Exactly, we're safe.
Okay. Meche. Bow half to starboard. Meche. That's starboard. Mr. Pilot, ship is staying clear of this corner.
Okay, good. Thank you.
They did it. After 3 nerve-wracking hours, the ship and its cargo remain undamaged and can continue their journey through the Panama Canal.
Captain, now
Okay.
we're gonna let go the tugs.
Let go the tug phone off.
We're clear
Okay.
from the lock, so
Okay.
we're free.
Totally clear from lock. Yeah.
The pilot disembarks. Captain Su once again takes full control of his ship.
I'm feeling very happy.
And
Excited. Yeah, absolutely. Today, we can pass the new Panama Canal because I had a very good cooperation with the pilots.
For the mega transport and its extremely valuable cargo, it is now time to traverse 82 kilometers on one of the world's most iconic and important waterways. The transit takes all of 9 hours. Traveling through the Panama Canal saves the ship an impressive 3 weeks of travel time, which you would otherwise need to get from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean. No wonder that annually, in excess of 15,000 commercial ships travel through it. Since the expansion, the annual cargo loads have doubled to 600 million tons. That's 6% of all maritime freight traffic in the world, which includes our mega transport. And even after 20 years of professional experience, it's still a special event for Captain Su.
I am very proud to be captain on this vessel, and I'm excited to experience the Panama Canal.
The Trapper is scheduled to reach Australia and New Zealand in 3 weeks. But to continue the journey, the ship still has to reach the level of the Pacific Ocean. At the end of the canal, Su and his crew face another 3-chamber lock system, the Kakoli locks. The task? Lower the ship by 27 meters. Instead of stepping up, now we step down. Based on the experience from this morning, it should be no problem. And after an extremely eventful day, the Trapper is one step closer to its goal. Now, it's plain sailing non-stop across the mighty Pacific, all the way to Auckland. The trip will last for a total of 21 more days, until the Trapper finally reaches New Zealand. 49 days have passed since the Autoliner started in Antwerp. The mega transport is set to reach the other side of the world tomorrow. But there is still one final inspection. And no, it doesn't involve technical issues.
If we have any insects on board, this is against the law, especially in countries like Australia and New Zealand.
In the worst case, the authorities could prohibit the crew from opening the gates and keep them from delivering thousands of cars.
Okay, Chef, we're going to check the kitchen now.
It's no joke. A crew looking for needles in the haystack. Top priority for certain.
Chef, you've got cooking oil here. I can feel it on my fingers. Brush that away. Chef, come here. The floor is dirty. You should wipe down here, okay?
Okay.
New Zealand has some of the strictest quarantine regulations in the world, especially when it comes to food. We're literally talking about every grain of rice here.
Chef, where's the rice?
Over here.
Where did you load it?
In Bremerhaven.
Okay, then it's still good. Keep going.
Despite some criticism about the cook's cleanliness, the official food inspectors are satisfied in the end.
Good job. Well done.
Good job. Okay, next.
Now everything is ready for the Mega Transport's final chapter. Day 50. Despite a monumental stretch of over 28,000 kilometers, the world's biggest Autoliner is on time at its first port of call on the other side of the world, Auckland, New Zealand. Thousands of new cars and hundreds of the high and heavies will find their ways to new owners. A mega transport around the globe. All possible thanks to a bunch of little gears interlocking perfectly. Stevedores who bring each vehicle on board and then offload them with incomparable dedication.
Just like I was young, I was playing with the cars, with the toys. Now it's the same, but it's a little bit bigger.
Dock workers who solve every problem, even when it's tricky, and our unflappable port captain, without whose meticulous planning, everything would collapse like a house of cards.
It's like Christmas every time it happens. It's really, really satisfying, because you have worked so tremendous hard.
The biggest vehicle transporter in the world. After 50 days of extreme logistics, this mega challenge of a transport has reached the goal of its journey, the other end of the world. It's now officially a real mega transport.